Chapter 4 Saturn Inn bulged. Every room was crowded with half a dozen to the cubicle, sleeping in relays. Those who couldn't find anywhere else to sleep spread blankets in the narrow corridors, or dozed off in chairs, or slept on the barroom floor. A few of them got stepped on. Titan City's Junior Chamber of Commerce had done what it could to help the situation out, but the notice had been short. A half-dozen nearby rocks, which had been hastily leveled off for parking space, now were jammed with hundreds of space vehicles, ranging from the nifty two-man job owned by Billy Jones, sports editor of the Daily Rocket, to the huge excursion liners sent out by the three big transport companies. A few hastily erected shelters helped out to some extent, but none of these shelters had a bar and were mostly untenanted. Mo, the bartender at the inn, harried with too many customers, droopy with lack of sleep, saw Oliver Meek bobbing around in the crowd that surged against the bar, much after the manner of a cork caught in a raging whirlpool. He reached out a hand and dragged Meek against the bar. "Can't you do something to stop it?" Meek blinked at him. "Stop what?" "This game," said Mo. "It's awful, Mr. Meek. Honestly, the crowd has got the fellers so worked up, it's apt to be a mass murder." "I know it," Meek agreed, "but you can't stop it now. The Junior Chamber of Commerce would take the hide off anyone who even said he would like to see it stopped. It's more publicity than Saturn has gotten since the first expeditions were lost here." "I don't like it," declared Mo stolidly. "I don't like it either," Meek confessed. "Gus and those other fellows on his team think I'm an expert. I told them what I knew about space polo, but it wasn't much. Trouble is, they think it's everything there is to know. They figure they're a cinch to win, and they got their shirts bet on the game. If they lose, they'll more than likely spacewalk me." Fingers tapped Meek's shoulders, and he twisted around. A red face loomed above him, a cigarette drooping from the corner of its lips. "Hear you say you was coaching the 23 bunch?" Meek gulped. "Billy Jones? That's me," said the lips with the cigarette. "Best darn sports writer ever pounded keys. Been trying to find out who you was. Nobody else knows. Treat you right." "You must be wrong," said Meek. "Never wrong," insisted Jones. "Nose for news. Smell it out, like this." His nose crinkled in imitation of a bloodhound, but his face didn't change otherwise. The cigarette still dangled, pouring smoke into a watery left eye. "Heard the guy call you Meek," said Jones. "Name sounds familiar. Something about Juno, wasn't it? Rounded up a bunch of crooks? Found a space monster of some sort?" Another hand gripped Meek by the shoulder and literally jerked him around. "So you're the guy," yelped the owner of the hand. "I've been looking for you. I've a good notion to smack you in the puss." "Now, Bud," yelled Mo in mounting fear, "you leave him alone. He ain't done a thing." Meek gaped at the angry face of the hulking man, who still had his shoulder in the grip of a monstrous paw. Bud Craney, the ring rat that had stolen Gus's injector, the captain of the 37 team. "If there was room," Craney grated, "I'd wipe up the floor with you. But since there ain't, I'm just plain gonna hammer you down about halfway into it." "But he ain't done nothing," shrilled Mo. "He's an outsider, ain't he?" demanded Craney. "What business he got coming in here and messing around with things?" "I'm not messing around with things, Mr. Craney," Meek declared, trying to be dignified about it. But it was hard to be dignified with someone lifting one by the shoulder so one's toes just barely touched the floor. "All that's the matter with you," insisted the dangling Meek, "is that you know Gus and his men will give you a whipping. They'd done it anyhow. I haven't helped them much. I haven't helped them hardly at all." Craney howled in rage. "Why, you—" And then Oliver Meek did one of those things no one ever expected him to do, least of all himself. "I'll bet you my spaceship," he said, "against anything you got." Astonished, Craney opened his hand and let him down on the floor. "You'll what?" he roared. "I'll bet you my spaceship," said Meek, the madness still upon him, "that 23 will beat you." He rubbed it in. "I'll even give you odds." Craney gasped and sputtered. "I don't want any odds," he yelped. "I'll take it even. My moss patch against your ship." Someone was calling Meek's name in the crowd. "Mr. Meek! Mr. Meek!" "Here," said Meek. "What about that story?" demanded Billy Jones, but Meek didn't hear him. A man was tearing his way through the crowd. It was one of the men from the 23. "Mr. Meek," he panted, "you've got to come right away. It's Gus. He's all tangled up with rheumatiz." Gus stared up with anguished eyes at Meek. "It sneaked up on me while I slept," he squeaked. "Laid off of me for years until just now. Limped once in a while, of course, and got a few twinges now and then, but that was all. Never had me tied up like this since I left Earth. One of the reasons I never did go back to Earth. Space is a good climate for rheumatiz. Cold but dry. No moisture to get into your bones." Meek looked around at the huddled men, saw the worry that was etched upon their faces. "Get a hot water bottle," he told one of them. "Shoot," said Russ Jensen, a hulking framed spaceman. "There ain't no such thing as a hot water bottle nearer than Titan City." "An electric pad, then." Jensen shook his head. "No pads, neither. Only thing we can do is pour whiskey down him, and if we pour enough down him to cure the rheumatiz, we'll get him drunk, and he won't be no more able to play in that game than he is right now." Meek's weak eyes blinked behind his glasses, staring at Gus. "We'll lose sure if Gus can't play," said Jensen. "And me with everything I got bet on our team." Another man spoke up. "Meek could play in Gus's place." "Nope, he couldn't," declared Jensen. "The rats from 37 wouldn't stand for it." "They couldn't do a thing about it," declared the other man. "Meek's been here 6 weeks today. That makes him a resident. 6 Earth weeks, the law says. And all that time he's been in Sector 23. They wouldn't have a leg to stand on. They might squawk, but they couldn't make it stick." "You're certain of that?" demanded Jensen. "Dead certain," said the other. Meek saw them looking at him, felt a queasy feeling steal into his stomach. "I couldn't," he told them. "I couldn't do it. You go right ahead, Oliver," said Gus. "I wanted to play, of course. Sort of set my heart on that cup. Had the mantelpiece all dusted off for it. But if I can't play, there ain't another soul I'd rather have play in my place than you." "But I don't know a thing about polo," protested Meek. "You taught it to us, didn't you?" bellowed Jensen. "You pretended like you knew everything there was to know." "But I don't," insisted Meek. "You wouldn't let me explain. You kept telling me all the time what a swell coach I was, and when I tried to argue with you and tell you that I wasn't, you yelled me down. I never saw more than one game in all my life, and the only reason I saw it then was because I found the ticket. It was on the sidewalk and I picked it up. Somebody had dropped it." "So you been stringing us along," yelped Jensen. "You been making fools of us. How do we know but you showed us wrong? You been giving us the wrong dope." He advanced on Meek, and Meek backed against the wall. Jensen lifted his fist, held it in front of him as if he were weighing it. "I oughta bop you one," he decided. "All of us had oughta bop you one. Every danged man in this here room has got his shirt bet on the game because we figured we couldn't lose with a coach like you." "So have I," said Meek, but it wasn't until he said it that he really realized he did have his shirt bet on 23. His spaceship. It wasn't all he had, of course, but it was the thing that was nearest to his heart, the thing he had slaved for 30 years to buy. He suddenly remembered those years now. Years of bending over account books in the dingy office back on Earth, watching other men go out in space, longing to go himself. Counting pennies so that he could go, spending only a dime for lunch, and eating crackers and cheese instead of going out for dinner in the evening. Piling up the dollars slowly through the years. Dollars to buy the ship that now stood out on the field, all damage repaired, sitting poised for space. But if 37 won, it wouldn't be his any longer. It would be Craney's. He'd just made a bet with Craney, and there were plenty of witnesses to back it up. "Well?" demanded Jensen. "I will play," said Meek. "And you really know about the game? You wasn't kidding us?" Meek looked at the men before him, and the expression on their faces shaped his answer. He gulped and gulped again, then slowly nodded. "Sure, I know about it," he lied. They didn't look quite satisfied. He glanced around, but there was no way of escape. He faced them again, back pressed against the wall. He tried to make his voice light and breezy, but he couldn't quite keep out the croak. "Haven't played it much in the last few years," he said, "but back when I was a kid I was a 10-goal man." They were satisfied at that.